Okay.
Oh, now it's like super clear in my ears. So lovely to meet you virtually in person.
Yes.
I was kind of skimming through our Instagram conversation to remind myself what we had talked about a little bit. So you've been working on back stuff for a while, but particularly are interested in mostly like upper back and neck flexibility. You've got like
Yeah, because I used to have it and it kind of went away.
Yeah, want to get it back. Doing it in a way that feels safe on your neck. But like really kind of end goals being able to go a little bit deeper in things like King Cobra, particularly like through the neck and the upper back to get toes close to your head, things like that.
Yeah, like my active relaxation is just like it's like my muscles forgot. Like I can get it to relax passively if I put weight behind it, but like they just
Yeah. But then telling like, all right, now let's find that and use our muscles to get that range of motion, and it's just not happening. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So there's some
also
sort of a
super common
disconnect.
for like even folks who've been like working on it for a while to have a much larger range of passive range of motion through the upper back and the neck than active. So we can absolutely do all sorts of stuff on that. Since I am not terribly familiar with kind of your spinal cord lesion you mentioned you have in your neck, I will be relying on you to let me know if things are hurting, feeling uncomfortable, feeling questionable, any kind of tingling you're feeling in any of your limbs. All of those kinds of things are going to be red flags for us. But otherwise, we'll kind of just work on all of the good muscly stuff.
Yep. And the good thing is it's in the cord, not the spine
Got it. So
flexi area. So we shouldn't be able to harm it or affect it. Yeah.
Are you warmed up at all, or do we need to start with a bit of
yeah, I'm warm. I'm as warm as I feel like I need to be to do most things. Like if I was trying to get to like my deepest bridge, I'd want to be more warm, but I also didn't want to like exhaust myself beforehand. Specifically, bridges tend to be a little bit more exhausting for me, and I think it has to do with the areas that I have those weaknesses in now. Whereas elbow bridges feel much easier. So
yes, yeah, and you're not supporting like as much weight
as much, yeah.
Endurance in elbow bridges way less intense than like regular bridges.
Yeah.
All of that sounds good. So then why don't we check in on what your passive range of motion is, just to give me an idea. Sure. I want you to grab some kind of a chair, or if you've got like a low table or something. Oh, perfect.
I'm prepared.
A couple rounds of booty drops. But what I want you to do is lean backwards on the chair with the edge of the chair right at the bottom of your shoulder blades. Hands holding onto the back of the chair with elbows pointing towards the ceiling. And let me see how low you can drop your butt and reach it backwards under the legs of the chair. So this should already feel kind of squeezy. Usually feels a little more squeezy in the mid-back by the bottom of the ribs. And then you're going to push your hips back up. So just dropping that butt down the back, pushing it up. Using your back muscles to pull the butt backwards. Beautiful. Not just pushing through the feet. Nice. Looks great. Let me have you do this just a couple more times. Yeah, you've got plenty of passive range of motion in your upper back, as you suspected. So let's me also see what your neck range of motion looks like.
Yeah, that's less good passive.
What was that?
And that's less good passive. I had some issues for a while with breath stuff to do with the spine lesion, and it's gotten under control and better and everything, but it made my front of my throat really tight.
I see.
So I've been working on it.
Like overcompensating.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to like look all the way towards the ceiling?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay, got it.
There.
Nice. Yeah. So in terms of like whole neck extension, you've got quite a bit to look at. This type of neck extension where the back of our skull is just chilling out on our shoulders and our upper back, the most passive. So let me see what your active neck extension looks like seated. So for this one, I want you to try to keep the back of your neck flat. We're only going to try to bend and arch from the very top vertebrae. So what this can look like is you can take 4 fingers is usually a good size. Take them on the back of your neck, and this is going to serve as a bumper and a little bit of support. You're only going to lift your head until the back of your skull hits your pinky, and then drop it down. Doing that a couple times, just doing this a really small arch through the neck, and then we'll take that hand away. See, can we keep lifting the head to look towards the ceiling, but with touching our shoulders. This will feel tight in the front of the throat because those deep neck flexors are engaging. Nice, good, great, keeping the back of the head high. Nice, looks good. And then go ahead, tuck your
There.
chin, a couple times, let that touch it. Yes, this looks good. You got good control here, so we'll just try to work on going a little bit deeper. When it comes to arching through our neck, I like to have students experiment with 3 options. These are not the only 3 that exist, but these are kind of the 3 most common that are usually nice to play with. So in all of the stuff we're doing, we're gonna kind of check in on which of these feels better. It may feel different doing these upright like we're doing now versus doing them in a puppy pose versus doing them like when you're upside down in a bridge or something. But option
Right.
number 1 is pretty much what we just did. It's just looking up towards the ceiling without thinking about it very much. Just noticing, what does this feel like in your throat? What does it feel like in the back of your neck? For me, this feels kind of crunchy in the back of my neck because it's unsupported. For some people, it feels fine in their neck. Option number 2, we're gonna reach our nose as far forwards as we can. So we are protracting our head and our neck, reaching that nose forwards, reaching that nose up, 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 up as high as we can, and then letting that head come back. Option number 3 is tucking our chin towards our chest, not looking down towards the floor, but we're retracting our head and face. So trying to pull our ears behind our shoulders before we look up towards the ceiling. So just
Yeah,
going through those 3 options. Seeing
that last one I learned from Jen Crane a long time ago, and I definitely feel like it's helpful, but only to a degree, because like it kind of almost stops me, I feel like. So I like
Yeah,
the
for that one, it's useful, and I find it the most useful in certain situations like chin stands and chest stands. I personally don't find it as comfortable, but that's a really nice one to find your deep neck flexors. I know she talks a lot about that. It's one of the safest ones for people who feel like their head is really, really heavy and they can't like let it relax backwards at all. That gets all that muscle engagement first, and then maybe only lift your head a little bit.
Okay.
Personally, my favorite is the nose forwards.
Should I be avoiding letting my chest help? Because like that's the like obvious pairing, and what my body wants to do is like let the chest lift to help with the neck.
I see. Just for this one, yes, keep your chest
Try
and
to
your
avoid
ribs
it.
quiet. Don't let them do anything. When we're combining upper back and neck, then everything can totally move at once. But for now, just while you're experimenting which of these feels best, try to keep those shoulders and the ribs and the chest nice and quiet. Yeah, this looks right. I don't see your shoulders going forwards either, which sometimes our shoulders do funny things when we're trying to arch through the neck. So that's good to see.
Yeah, I definitely feel like work in here, but I also don't feel like it's necessarily relaxing as much as I would like it to.
And yeah, and at some point it's not going to relax all the way. It kind of like if you're doing a drop back from standing, you don't want your abs to relax all the way because we are
Right.
using that support to not crunch all of our vertebrae together. So we want it to be relaxed enough to extend and let that stretch happen, but not so relaxed that we're not giving our body the support we need. So it's probably always going to feel like a little bit of tension, but there's going to be that fine line between the helpful amount of tension and then so much tension that we're not going to.
And do you ever pay attention to the pecs with the neck extension? Does that make any difference? How they activate?
That's a good question. It's not something I've ever felt in my body, and it's not something I've had any students mention before. None of your pectoral muscles would go up into your cervical spine, so technically it shouldn't make a difference. Most of our pecs really connect to the upper arm bone, so depending on what you're doing with your arms and your shoulders and your chest, it might be doing something with those muscles, but whether they're contracting or relaxing theoretically shouldn't matter.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because they tend to want to tighten, but then I don't. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right. So now that I've seen some neck stuff, I've seen your passive range of motion. Let us see if we can identify some of the muscles in both your shoulders and your upper back to help find that arch. So when we talk about the muscles that contribute to arching in our upper back, there are a couple of different groups of things. Let me see if it's easier to show on this guy than on my body. The ones that I usually care about the most, and these ones we'll work on first, are our rector muscles. So our rector spinae pretty much go up and down each side of our spine. We have some that go from like our hips and our low back. We've got plenty in our upper back. We've got some that are coming up to our neck. but they're this big, like, tenderloiny thing that goes up and down each side of our spine. Their only job is spinal extension, pulling our torso backwards in space. So we're gonna try to do some drills to find those guys. Other muscles can help. Are some of the muscles that attach to our shoulder blades, and some of the muscles that attach to our upper arm. Because our shoulder blades and our upper mind by association are loosely attached to our ribs. They're not literally attached here. They're attached to our collarbone and everything else is attached. But when we try to pull our shoulder blades and our upper arm down and back in space, often that can help pull the top of our ribs back as well. So we'll do a little bit of stuff for shoulder engagement, a little bit of stuff for back engagement specifically, see if either of those works
Okay.
better in your body. The first one I want to see lying on your stomach, and this first one won't be upper back specific. I just want to find our erectors as the whole muscle group. So we'll only do a couple reps of this. Legs are going to stay flat on the floor. Arms are reaching backwards, not really actively squeezing. My shoulders are going to be nice and relaxed. Let me just have you lift your chest up and drop it down a couple of times. And what I want you to feel are those muscles on either side of your spine. For this one, you might feel it more in your mid-back, near the bottom of the ribs. If you don't feel it in the upper back, that's okay. But I just want you to bring some awareness to what those muscles contracting feels like.
And where do you want my arms? To the side or a little
I
back?
think reaching back towards your feet is the easiest. That keeps more of your body weight backwards. Lots of times in back bending training, I have other arm variations that I give, but for this one, just for finding the erectors, having the arms reaching back is great. So where do you feel most of the squeeze in this exercise?
I mean, kind of right in the low.
Mid-back. Yeah, that's really, really
area.
common. So what we're gonna try to do is see, can we get any of that squeeze a little higher up your back? And I
Okay.
can't remember if this was the exercise that you mentioned. Oh, you said it was the Cobra one with the strap that you tried it and you still couldn't find the squeeze in this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
But we're gonna see, can we find it by actually lifting our chest a teeny bit less? And we might try a couple different arm variations if that helps as well. So next time you lift your torso, because you are lucky, you have enough back strength, you can lift like most of your ribs off of the ground here. Instead of coming up as high as humanly possible, I want you to imagine that there is like a pencil right underneath your under boob, and we are trying to smush that pencil into the floor. So we're only lifting our chest, but then I want you to try to smush the space under your boobs down into the floor. For this one, arms can reach backwards. They can be reaching forwards. Doesn't really matter where they are, but I want your shoulders to be soft and relaxed, so we're not squeezing them in any particular direction, but seeing if by pushing the underside of our chest towards the floor, while we're trying to lift our nipples off of the ground, can we find a little bit more of that squeeze, a little higher up our back between those shoulder blades?
Okay.
So you can try a couple times with arm back. You could try a couple times with arms forwards if that helps.
Oh, hey, there you go.
Nice. Yes, yes, good. This is perfect. And you're only lifting your chest just the amount we want. So by keeping the middle of your ribs on the floor, we're not letting you arch from your mid back. This is like the babiest of the baby cobras where you are only arching through your upper back.
Okay.
So this is a very unsatisfying because it's such a small movement, but a really nice way to start waking up those muscles. Does this feel like squeeze kind of between the shoulder blades, maybe a teeny bit higher, teeny bit lower?
It's definitely still lower, but it's, I don't know, like instead of being down at the bottom of the ribs, it's kind of like a little below the
little
brow
higher than
line.
before.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we can also work on to get some of the other upper back muscles, since you're interested in neck, is doing a little active neck extension in this position as well. So that'll be a lot of upper traps. Our upper traps are going kind of from the top of our shoulder blades all the way up our neck to our skull. So I want you to do that same just tiny lift, but this time we're also gonna try to look up towards the ceiling, using whichever neck engagement feels the most comfortable. So option number 1 was just flopping your head backwards if that's the most comfortable. Option number 2 was reaching your nose forwards and scooping it up. And then option number 3 was the double chin, pulling your head backwards in space before we're lifting our chest. So as you're lifting your chest, we're adding that arch to the neck, looking up as much as we can, and then lowering on down.
Now, where do we want to feel this? Because I feel this like a lot like in my neck itself.
Yes.
And that's the-
Or anything where your neck is actively extending or arching backwards, it will feel like a squeeze in the muscles in the back of your neck.
Okay.
As long as it does not feel, I would say, crunchy or any kind of sharp pain, to arch your neck backwards, we have to use those muscles in the back of your neck. Technically, you might feel it a little bit lower as well, going into some of the vertebrae or the space between your shoulder blades as well, but feeling it just as the neck squeeze is totally fine.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's
Nice.
good.
All right, so this is a good one. Let us see. Can we still find these muscles in a different position, in a different orientation, where we don't have the mid back quite as turned up?
I feel like my head is so far from being really lifted in that that last one, but
It's very unsatisfying. Let's see. Do you have a foam roller by
Yes.
any chance? Perfect. All right, let me know if that's a textured one, if this drill is uncomfortable, because we can also just slide the hands on the floor, but I really like the roller. So another variation of that last drill that does use a little bit of shoulder engagement is doing cobra roll-ups. And this is a nice way to, if you can find that upper back engagement first, get as much of an arch to the upper back as you can, and then trying to keep it while we go a little deeper. So what this is gonna look like, we're gonna start with our arms on the roller, arms about shoulder width apart, palms facing in. And I want you to start just coming to that chest lift position, keeping the space underneath your boobs, pushing into the ground, arching through the neck, lifting our head as much as we can, starting to lift our chest. Imagine you're gonna lift your nipples and point them forwards, but keeping all of the ribs from your underside of your boobs towards your belly button on the floor. So we're trying to find that squeeze through our upper back. Keeping that squeeze, we're gonna start to push our arms into the roller. Then we can start lifting our ribs. Still feeling good. We can start arching backwards, lifting our belly to our high cobra. And then we're gonna come back down one vertebrae at a time. Taking that belly down. Okay, low back is turned off. Taking the middle of the ribs down, but keeping the chest lifted. Now we're back to just that upper back and neck. Then we can drop the chest. Now we're pretty much just neck. And then we can drop the head. So trying to go area by area. Slow and controlled. Breathing. We've got a little bit of arm push to help. Nice. Neck looks good. Then just the chest. Beautiful. And you can start to lift those ribs. And if you need to kind of like slide your arms down the roller, sometimes depending on how high you go, we gotta keep that too. Nice. Upper back looks good. Can you reach your chest any farther forwards as you're coming on up? Yes.
No.
Good. Nice. And keep it up. Beautiful.
yeah,
So
like
for
right
most people,
here
the
is
higher
way
you go
harder
into the
than up
cobra,
here.
more of the arch goes into the low back. So I want you to try to make sure you can feel that same squeezy sensation kind of at the bottom of your shoulder blades the whole way you're continuing to roll up. And if at any point you feel like you lose that engagement because your body gets excited and more of the squeeze goes lower in your back, you're going to kind of reset lower back down.
Okay.
So we're trying to train your body to keep that sweet, sweet upper back engagement using those muscles that you just found in the last two drills. Nice. Look good. Awesome, keeping those lower ribs low. This looks great. I still see the tiniest arch at the bottom of the shoulders. Awesome. Beautiful. And then you can melt back down. Good. Go ahead, relax for a moment. Tuck your chin in your chest, shake your hip no a couple times. So that's one I also really like for both finding those same upper back muscles we just did with chest lifts, but trying to keep that engagement while we're layering on some other muscles in the other parts of our back as well.
Okay.
Let's do another one, trying to find the upper back squeeze. We'll start with a block. If the block is weird, we cannot use the block, but this one usually just depends on how slippery your leggings are and body proportion. I want you to be kneeling. We're gonna have a block between our stomach and our thighs. So we're kind of smushing into that block. And the point of the block, or doing no block in a total forward fold, is to flatten out our low back. Our mid back is still able to arch here, and from our mid back, usually I mean like the very bottom of our rib cage. That's the lower part of our thoracic spine, upper part of our thoracic spine. I consider everything from like bottom of shoulder blades up. From here, you are going to keep your belly on the block. We're going to bring our fingertips to the tops of the shoulders, elbows pointing forwards. This is going to help bring our shoulder blades towards the sides of the ribs and get them out of the way. Often it's hard to arch to the upper back when our shoulder blades are squeezing together because they get in the way. Elbows forwards usually helps get them out of the way. From here, we're just going to be trying to lift as much as we can, trying to lift your chest up until we're feeling that squeeze between the shoulder blades, maybe right at the base of the shoulder blades, maybe a teeny bit higher, and then lower.
So I think I need an alternative for this drill because I like the concept, but I can't handle the block pressing into the diaphragm with my particular.
Does it feel okay to lean forwards on your belly?
Okay,
So
just
lean forward, like belly on your thighs. It's just a deeper forward fold, so it's a little bit harder from body weight wise. But hopefully the lack of straight block edge on diaphragm pressure feels a little bit better. Go ahead and take your fingertips to the top of your shoulders if you've got the upper back strength to keep them off the floor. Nice. Good. And can you lift your chest any higher while keeping your belly button on your thighs? There we go. Nice. Good. And then you can relax back to your very deep forward fold. Yeah, and then try that lift again. Nice. Does that feel squeezy in that same spot?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure exactly where I'm activating. My awareness with that one's not very good, but
that one's a little bit more challenging because you might be activating a little bit more in the mid back instead of the upper back, but I can still see that you're arching I'm really looking for usually bra strap height and a teeny bit above is the part of the upper back we're really trying to target. And I see that arching a teeny bit for you. So I think
perfect.
Even if you don't have the awareness, we are getting the squeezes.
Yeah. Usually when you can't feel activation just means that things are not aware yet and they improve pretty fast in my experience.
And especially for groups of muscles that you've been training around and not using specifically for such a long time. These aren't huge muscles. It's not like we're learning to use our biceps or our hamstrings all of a sudden where it's really obvious when they contract. So some of that awareness will come a little bit more. And
I think that was a lot of my issue because you lose the awareness of those muscles and all the tricks that I used to develop those muscles before, I now have other muscles strong enough to compensate.
Yes, that are well, surely you want us to help instead.
Right. So it's you gotta really get to not let anything else do it. Yeah.
So on a similar concept to that, so far pretty much most of the muscles we have been trying to target were those erector spinae. So these are the ones that just go straight up and down on each side of our spine. Let's do a little bit trying to use our mid and our lower traps. Those are the ones that can help bring our shoulder blades in and down. Pulling our shoulder blades down can occasionally help us arch a little bit farther back. We're also going to use our lats and our external rotators to be pulling our upper arms, which are connected to our shoulder blades, which are eventually connected to our pelvis, connected to our sternum, connected to our ribs. Another muscle group that can, by association, pull us into the back bend. For this one, I like doing it in a cobra pose. So let me have you first come to just a regular high cobra, however you normally get into it. A high cobra that's feeling comfortable. Talk me through what it's feeling like. Then we're going to add some hopefully new engagements. Okay, so what does this feel like in your body?
Nothing.
Yeah.
And then I try to pull
arches in your low back, and I see if you push in your hands, your low back is great. I will arch more. Sure.
No more. Yeah.
So let's see if we can have the low back step aside for a moment and get more of that mid and upper back. So one of the engagements I really like is going to be, instead of pushing our hands into the floor, to literally push our torso backwards in space. I want you to pull your hands backwards towards your hips as if you're pulling your chest forwards. And there's going to be one thing we're going to add. First, let me just have you pull your chest forwards a little bit. See what that feels like in your high cobra. But keeping those hips on the floor. Start with your hands a little farther forwards. That'll give us a little bit more of a longer lever arm, more
I
mechanical.
feel like it's harder for me to get any like of that like pull feeling out here. Whereas here it feels much easier to pull. I don't know if that's just my arms
Oh,
aren't.
interesting. That's surprising because when your arms are closer to your ribs, the muscles are already in a shorter position. So for most people, that would mean it's a little bit harder. Yeah, if it feels easier to engage with your hands are closer, keep them closer then.
Okay.
Okay, the second thing I want you to add, in addition to pulling your wrists back in space, is we're going to try to externally rotate the shoulder. Well, what that means from a like a practical perspective is we're going to try to rotate our biceps to the outside because we have our lats that are connecting to our upper arm that can be pulling us backwards. We also have muscles that are connecting from our shoulder blade to that upper arm that can help rotate it to the outside. And then we can pull those shoulder blades down and back. So the action that we're doing, it would be as if you were going to twist your hands to the outside, but our hands are stuck on the floor. All that's happening is our biceps and the elbow crease are starting to rotate towards the outside. In our cobra, we're going to pull our wrists backwards, and then you're going to try to point those elbow creases forwards. And I want you to imagine you're taking the very back of your shoulders, pulling them backwards in space. Seeing as that give us any kind of a squeeze between the shoulders, any bit more of an arch in the upper, in the mid back. Oh, we got a teeny bit. Low back is still helping quite a bit, but I'm seeing a little bit more.
Yeah,
on your shoulders.
that's the problem. Anything that's like easy for the low back to take over, it's so because it's just so much
So
more
we're gonna
aware in
only
the
do
upper.
these same 2 engagements, but we're gonna do it in low cobra. So this means your mid back might then be the piece that's compensating, but at least we'll be turning off the low back. So in your low cobra, we've got belly button, all of our stomach on the floor. So we're going to be pulling elbows backwards in space as if you were reaching your chest and your sternum forwards. And then we're going to try to pull back sides of our shoulders backwards as if you were going to be rotating your hands and your biceps to the outside, keeping that space.
Yeah, I feel that much more.
Nice. Oh yeah, this looks way more archy. Perfect. And now your mid back is like, oh, I can help too. But I do see it coming into a little bit in that upper back. So
Yeah, and I can feel it
also muscle
between my shoulder blades.
Nice. Good. So for doing this particular drill, you could just be working on holding the engagement using these muscles for like 5 seconds and then relax. Add that squeeze, hold for 5 and relax. As that gets more comfortable, you can increase the duration to like 10 seconds or 15 seconds, but getting used to finding those muscles, turning them on, and then letting them take a break. So your body is just getting aware of where these muscles live, what they do to your upper arms and your shoulders so that you can access them.
Yeah, they're definitely already engaging better than they were at the start of the day. So we're the start of our session.
The one I'd say like catch with this particular engagement is this works really well in cobras. Technically, it works a little bit in camel, anything where we've kind of got our arms in front of our chest or underneath us. This particular engagement does not work as well when we're in an arms overhead back bend like a bridge. For that one, we really have to use mostly our erectors, those muscles we found earlier on either side of our spine to be pulling us.
That makes a lot of sense why specifically like getting my chest to the wall in a bridge, it took as long as getting my feet with my heels onto the floor in my chest stand, probably because it was realistically the chest stand, I was able to relax them. The other one I really had to engage more. So
yes, yeah, that's super common. Yeah, unless your low back is folding like more than in half, getting the chest to the wall is mostly like active upper back to coax in that arch.
yeah, and everybody seems to think that that's like the easy part and the low back is the hard part. And it's like, well, we're all different people.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's, I also work with, so the vast majority of people have a harder time finding their upper back versus their lower back. But like 10% of the students I work with have the opposite. Their upper back like happily folds in class. They are, as far as I'm concerned, genetic anomalies, and their low back is super duper tight. And their hip flexors are really tight, and their like sacrum to lumbar spine is super tight. And yeah, bodies are wild. All right, so I know we're running a little bit over time, but I want to make sure we've got a couple minutes in case you have any additional questions for me on anything we've done so far.
So I guess the one other question that I would have is, I know one of the issues that I do have is when I go from like arms down to like arms overhead. My shoulders are actually fairly flexible, and I don't think that's necessarily as much the
Talking
problem.
about like elbow bridge and then pushing arms straight into regular bridge.
Yeah, so like to get the engagement in that middle back area with the arms overhead, I feel like what happens for me is my lats like take over and try to do all the work. Is there any trick that you might have in an overhead arm position for helping turn the lats off and make the erectors work? Or will realistically these floor kind of exercises sort of also train that as the erectors just get stronger?
That's a good question. 'Cause turning the lats off is hard because they are like the largest muscle group we have on our back. They're larger than our traps. And I also don't necessarily want to turn them off, especially when our arms are overhead and they're rotated. They're already in a bit of a stretched position as we're going backwards in space.
Right. So I guess maybe turn them off isn't the right key,
Yeah,
but
but try to make sure that they are not trying to do all of the work. So
right.
usually what I do is I focus on the easier positions to find the erectors first, where we don't have the
Okay.
arms overhead, seeing if we can get them to firing. Currently, the only kind of trick I have is when we're in upside down to try to find the squeezy upper back muscles is the chest scoop, which I think was in the post that you had mentioned the exercise you tried from. So instead of thinking about like pushing into our feet or pushing into our hands, two things that you might be able to do to help. One is reaching with your head backwards. So for the most part, at the very minimum, that will be giving you more of an arch and activation through your neck. For some people, arching through the neck and looking backwards is also going to use some of the upper traps and pull us into a little bit more of an upper back bend. What I like to think about to try to find those squeezy muscles in the upper back is reaching my chest forwards and then imagining I'm going to point my nipples down towards the floor. What that usually does is we close our shoulders a teeny bit, but then you might be able to find some of that squeeze in the upper back, and then you can go back to opening those shoulders again.
Okay, I think that's helpful.
The most effective cue I've found so far, but for the most part, it's just trying to find those squeezy muscles and pulling yourself backwards.
So I noticed that as you were doing that bridge there, part of this might just be, your level of warm and everything else, that you weren't really trying to commit a lot of weight through your shoulders into that, and your hands were a little forward of your shoulders. Yes. Is it okay to work that so that the erectors can work more and not worry as much about
Absolutely.
the shoulders?
And that's a great observation. I would suggest try not to do this at your like end range, stretchiest, crazy shoulder flexiest bridge. Start it in a bridge that feels like really, really easy. And then once you get in a position where your shoulders are like not really feeling like in much of a stretch at all, then you can try it in the positions where you actually got your shoulders stacked on top of your wrists, or if your shoulders don't really go past your wrist using a bigger.
Okay, because that kind of was a little connect in my mind when I was watching you do it. I was like, realistically, when I'm really trying to force my shoulders, it's probably making it harder to engage that area and not
because if you're trying to like do the deepest, like if you're trying to do a catch ankles where you're like getting maximum range of motion through your shoulders, when we're going end range in shoulders and end range in the lower back, it's hard to then like get a little bit of contraction somewhere else. For me in my body, and what seems to work with most of my students, I do this in needle scales, I do this teaching in drop backs, usually trying to work on each of shoulders, upper back, mid back, low back individually to get that squeeze, and starting whichever one is the hardest to obtain first, and then layering on the other pieces works really, really well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much. This was very helpful.
You're very welcome. Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you for all of the context and details ahead of time. That makes it so much easier to work on stuff like this. So next steps for me is I put this recording on YouTube, the private link, so other people won't see it. But feel free to email me or send me messages on Instagram if you got any questions when you're rewatching it. If you're like, oh, I should have asked blah, 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 but didn't think of it. Happy to kind of continue chatting about things if stuff comes up.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I got some stuff to kind of work with. Thanks.